And on behalf of my Deputy Provost, Councillor Ritchie, and myself, I'd like to give you all a very warm welcome to this morning's special meeting of Falkirk Council. Just to ensure that everybody can hear me up the back, would you raise your hands just to ensure that everybody can hear? Thank you very much. Okay. First of all, if you've got a mobile phone, could you please ensure that it's switched off? Thank you. Thank you for that. Now take the sederant. Thank you. Mr Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Provost Buchanan.
Present.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Present.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
Present.
Councillor Balfour. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett.
Present.
We have apologies from Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Okay. I have apologies from Councillor Kerr, and I assume apologies from Councillor McHugh. Apologies from Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. And Councillor Spears. Councillor Spears. Thank you. Councillor Spears. Thank you.
That takes us to declaration of interest, and just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Any declarations at this time? None? Okay, thank you for that. Item 3 on your agenda this morning. It's a minute of the meeting of the Planning Committee comprising all members of the Council held on the 28th of May 2019. It's pages 2 to 8 on your agenda. Morning, Councillor. Can we agree the minute? Thank you very much. That takes us to item 4 on the agenda this morning. It's development of land for residential use with associated open space, site development works and landscaping at Middle Rig Farm, Reading Muirhead, Falkirk for Taylor Wimpey UK. And the report is by Mr Ian Dryden. Thank you, Mr Dryden.
Thank you, Provost.
Right, okay.
We've got a deputation.
Did we get that?
It's in your supplementary agenda.
All right.
So there's a deputation. Want me just to say something?
I'll bring in Mr Moody at this point. Thank you.
Yes, Provost. It's just to remind members before Mr Dryden begins that there is a deputation request from the Reading Muirhead and Wollaston Community Council. So there's a decision for Council to take as to whether to hear the deputation.
Okay then, well, you've heard what Mr Moody said. As members agreed to hear the deputation. Councillor Nimmo first. Thank you.
Provost, just very quickly, obviously I'm one of the local members for the Reading Muirhead area, and I think it's appropriate that we hear what the Community Council's got to say.
Councillor Grant.
I disagree, Provost. We had the predetermination hearing and it was quite long and sufficient for everybody to have their voice. So I disagree. I think we shouldn't hear it.
Provost, I'm a member for Upper Braes, which also takes in part of the Community Council's area of Wollaston and Redmuirhead. So I'm like Councillor Nimmo. I think it would be appropriate to hear the Community Council's views. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I concur with both the other local members for the area. I think it's important in the interest of local democracy that community councils are heard, and I fully support the move to allow Reading and Reading Wollaston Community Council to be heard.
stage, Councillor Grant is the only one that's against the proposal. Is there anybody otherwise minded with Councillor Grant?
Provost, I'll second Councillor Grant.
Okay, so formalise. First of all, are you moving a motion, Councillor Nimmo, first?
Convener, I'm quite happy to move that we hear from the Redmuir Head Community Council.
And I'm happy to second.
Fine. And it'll be Councillor Grant, you proposing an amendment then to refuse?
I do, Provost, yes.
Seconded by Councillor Blackwood. Is there anybody else would like to come into the debate before we go to the vote? Okay, clear.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The motion then is to hear the deputation moved by Councillor Nimmo, seconded by Councillor Hughes, against which there's an amendment not to hear the deputation moved by Councillor Grant and seconded by Councillor Blackwood. Provost Buchanan.
Motion.
Deputy Provost Ritchie. Motion. Councillor Alexander. Motion. Councillor Balfour. Motion. Councillor Binney. Motion. Councillor Bissett. Motion. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Garner. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Munro. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. And Councillor Spears. Provost, there are 20 votes for the motion, 2 for the amendment, 1 abstention. The motion is carried and the Council accordingly agrees to hear the deputation.
In terms of the proposal, like to come forward, please? You'll get 10 minutes. Okay, sir, if you could just identify yourself to everybody, tell us who you are, what your position is, and you'll have 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay, thank you very much for hearing our deputation. I'm Danny Callaghan, and I'm the convener of Reading Muirhead Wollaston Community Council. And this application site is centred in our Community Council area. The Community Council support the officer's recommendations to refuse the planning application, but we'd like to highlight a few points. The residents of the area are totally against this application and have submitted 494 objections to the proposed development, plus a petition of 757 signatures. The main points of these objections have been covered by the officer's report and by representations made at the predetermination meeting. However, there are a few we feel require further mention. Flooding and drainage has been mentioned about this site, and if you actually saw the press, at the beginning of August, this site was actually flooded, and the local fire service had to help reduce the flooding. So there is a major problem of flooding on the site, no matter what has been said in various reports. Access to the site, you will know, is difficult, with Fairhaven Terrace being narrower than the recommended standard and as narrow as about 4 metres at one point, and with no facility to widen and substandard footpaths. The second possible access via Epworth Gardens is similarly narrow. It has been suggested, we believe, by the Roads Development Department that the only children's play park in Ready Muirhead, at the corner of Etworth Gardens and Wollaston Brae, should be included into the site to allow Etworth Gardens to be widened and a mini roundabout constructed on Wollaston Brae. We cannot understand how the Council can even contemplate allowing a developer to be given our only play park, which was gifted to the community and therefore is community land. The developer would then have to provide an alternative play park within the site. Of course, when would that be? And let's be honest, would future residents of the proposed development be welcoming to children from the village? We doubt that would be the case. Also, when would this play park become available to the village children? Bearing in mind a development of this size would in any case have to provide a play park, so this is letting the developer off providing one, as this would be a replacement. Transport documentation is suggesting a shuttle bus from the development could be provided. However, there is no time frame from what stage in the development this could be started, and for how long this would be provided by the developer and any subsidy. Also, a shuttle bus, as suggested, could further put into jeopardy the F25 service, which, although not an ideal service, is all that supply that provides a bus service to outlying villages in the area. Before you today, there's another planning application, and it's a site of similar size development and with similar timeframes for development. And the officers are recommending refusing granting the application. In the reasons for recommending refusing the application, paragraph 2 states, the application, while being assessed as effective, may not have any on-site completions based on the applicant's projections until after the adoption of Falkirk Local Development Plan 2, which will address the current housing land shortfall. In essence, this means that since no houses will be completed prior to the adoption of LDP 2, and that is expected to provide an appropriate level of housing land supply, the proposal is not seen as providing a timely solution to any current shortfall in deficit in house land. That statement should also apply to this application. I ask the Council, on behalf of the Community Council and the community, to agree with the recommendations of the Planning Officer and refuse this planning application. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, sir. Now there's an opportunity now for members of the committee to ask any questions in relation to the summary just been put before you. Have we any questions? No questions? Okay then, sir, you can retain your seat. Thank you. Okay then, it's an opportunity now for Mr Dryden to come forward with a report. It's pages 9 to 133 on your agenda papers. Thank you, Mr Dryden.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, this application before you, as you know, you were asked to consider this application at your meeting on the 10th of June. And as you will be aware, you'll see from paragraph 2 in the update report before you, there was at the time some outstanding matters, particularly in relation to traffic impact and the traffic assessment. And you will also, I will draw your attention to paragraph 2, where there is a slight amendment. The reasons for the continuation, as you see in the report, says the applicant to make further submissions. Indeed, it was our colleagues in the Transport Planning Unit who were, had some outstanding matters to assess as part of the traffic assessments. Apologies for that amendment. In terms of where matters stand now, turning to paragraph 3 in the update report before you, following the meeting at the 10th of June, there was further information that was received in relation to access proposals for Etworth Gardens and the subsequent modelling of the junctions. And you will see from the update report that these matters actually have now been resolved. Further work and mitigation is being proposed, and following further video survey work for the base data, It does indicate that the junction operates within the capacity during the AM and PM peak periods, particularly where there were concerns raised through representations about impacts on school times. So in short there, the outstanding roads and transportation matters are therefore considered to be closed, and the conclusion of these matters does not affect the previous recommendation for the 4 reasons of refusal that I'll come on to and are before you this morning. Turning to the flooding and drainage, you've heard Mr Callaghan raise some concerns in respect of flooding and drainage, but as you'll recall, that at the 10th of June, there was an update on the day of the meeting where SEPA had withdrawn their objection, and I would also point out in the update report that our own flood and drainage consultants were also satisfied that the updated flood risk assessment was now satisfactory. So in effect, flood and drainage matters have now been resolved. You also heard from Mr Callaghan in respect of the level of representations, and these have been considerable. These are outlined in your report before you, starting at paragraph 7, paragraph 8 on page 11. But I would also draw your attention to the fact that we have since received a further 6 representations since the June meeting. These consist of 5 objections, 1 letter in support, and more or less they relate to the same previous concerns. Particularly road safety concerns was a key component, particularly in relation to the primary school and traffic associated with that. But you'll see through the paragraphs in your report, further analysis has been undertaken by our colleagues in Roads Development Unit. And certainly on pages 12 and pages 13, you will see there are key locations in the locality that have been assessed, and you also have before you the accident statistics that have been accumulated over the last 10 years. And while clearly 1 accident is too many, on balance over a 10-year period, it is considered that the accident statistics do not show that there is a significant road safety concern, although obviously clearly we do not want to see accidents. So you will see our colleagues in roads of a mind that this would not be of significant concern to be cited as a reason for refusal. As I've said in the report, and you'll be aware, the appeal has now been lodged against non-determination by Taylor Wimpey, and the purpose of this report this morning is to really get your views on, in terms of contesting that appeal. Because it's an appeal against non-determination, it's a deemed refusal. And in short, what we are concluding is that there still remain fundamental policy concerns in respect of your development plans that exist just now and your emerging development plan LDP2, which is due to be adopted in 2020. It has been acknowledged and it is noted, and this is probably one of the reasons why the planning application has been lodged, that we still at the moment have an ineffective housing land supply. We're currently at around 4.1 years, which is equivalent of 599 houses. But as you've heard this morning, that through LDP2, this will certainly go a long way to addressing that concern. There is provision in the current LDP under HSGO1, which is highlighted in the main body of the report, which is in Appendix A. It shows you where, when you have an ineffective housing land supply, there are certain criteria that we will consider applications of this nature. And in this particular case, this is a greenfield site. It's not an urban capacity site. Does it fall within the actual boundary of the settlement? Nor is it a brownfield site. And therefore, in terms of the hierarchy, it falls down the pecking order. We also would draw attention that it's part of your LDP just now, and the emerging LDP too, is that in terms of strategic growth for housing, clearly Madison has been identified as an area that will see some of this growth, because it is accepted and acknowledged that this particular locality has seen its fair share of housing growth over the last few number of years. So in conclusion, the main policy reasons that have been put forward to you this morning, now that the technical reasons have been addressed in this update report, is that there are still fundamental policy grounds that we recommend to you this morning to consider, and would ask that you consider the recommendation that, should you be minded to support this, that we would instruct the Director to use the appendices, the meeting notes, and obviously the previous reports as the Council's case in respect of this forthcoming appeal. I would indicate to the DPA that it be minded to refuse the planning permission for the reasons detailed in the report, which are a text in Appendix A, which are policy reasons in terms of housing land. And also that I would also draw your attention to pages 130 and 131. That is normal the case with appeals For a reporter's benefit, the reporter also seeks to ask if he was of a mind to support the application. Having considered the appeal, we have to give a list of conditions and heads of terms of any obligations. So you'll see in Appendix B that there is actually, as part of our case, we have outlined a number of conditions and heads of terms that we would request the reporter to consider and take on board should he be minded to support the appeal once he's carried out his deliberations. That is all, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Those of us who attended the very well-attended meeting on the 30th of April would have seen the weight of local opinion regarding this proposal. It was, as I say, very well attended. There have now been 500 individual objections to this proposal, and indeed a petition with over 700 names. Now, Provost, that in itself, of course, is perhaps, it certainly gives weight, but it's not completely conclusive in determining whether or not to accept or to refuse a planning application. And had this proposal gone ahead at the meeting on the 10th of June, I would have spoken very strongly, giving reasons why I believe that this application should be refused. Now, we have, of course, moved on, and we are now at a stage where they have taken the matter to some extent out of our hands. But the powers that we do still have are to make our voice still heard to the reporter. And I think the proposals put forward by officers this morning and in their recommendations are very sensible to safeguard our position, to reflect, hopefully, the views of the majority of members of this council, and I thoroughly recommend that that course of action be followed. I think, Convener, as I said, we've moved on from the stage where I feel the need to go through item by item every reason why I thought this application should have been refused had it been called in June. So I'll content myself with supporting the views that have been expressed today by Mr Dryden and would urge colleagues to support the recommendations in item 18. Thank you, Provost.
Their apologies. I think your light was on first. Thank you.
Provost, thank you very much. The Councillor Nicholl's recollection of the predetermination meeting is relatively accurate, but we know that the volume of objections aren't a planning consideration per se. They do give members a clear indication of where the community are coming from. Any motion or amendment that is moved today has to be within planning guidelines, and I hope to come on to that in just a minute or so. But first of all, can I say that we have to congratulate and acknowledge the quality of the discussions that took place at the predetermination hearing. Both the developer and the local community put forward compelling cases for their particular position, and in terms of quality, it was excellent. The meeting was conducted in a very positive way. It was conducted in a very constructive way, and it should form the template for, I think, meetings in the future with regards to the planning process. On this particular occasion, I have to agree with the planners in terms of the position of the local authority. Like Councillor Nicholl, there are a considerable number of individual directions and objections that I believe are legitimate. I'll stick to the two strongest, I feel, at this point in time. And the first is the local plan. I've said many a time that the local plan is the Bible. A previous convener of the committee described it as a Bible, and it's a Bible for planners. I wouldn't put it as strongly as that, but I would say it does have a significant impact on the planning process. And the flaw we have in SDP 1 shouldn't take away the principle of the development plan is a democratic, consultative document that doesn't belong to me as convener of the planning committee, doesn't even involve or doesn't belong to the council. It's the people's development plan. They're the ones who determine what's in, what's out. They're the ones who determine the policy direction of the plan. And as we've already heard from the planners themselves, LDP 2 is on its way. It's not here yet, so therefore it doesn't have full strength in terms of its standing. But each stage it goes through brings added credibility and added strength to the emerging local plan. And I would certainly urge members to recognise that as one of the key factors in rejecting this particular application this morning. The other that I wish to speak on is the greenfield status of this particular application. And again, the greenfield status is something that is often underplayed, but on this particular occasion, I think it is crucial to the determination of this particular application. And the greenfield status is something that is worth protecting. I can understand and appreciate why developers would want to seek out greenfield sites, but while there are brownfield sites available, then it is perfectly legitimate for this authority to insist on seeking to protect the greenfield sites that we have. So with that, Provost, I would formally move the recommendations that are contained within the papers on page 14 page 14 of the agenda today, and hope that members will recognise the strength of the argument for rejection and reject the application accordingly.
That's a formal motion by Councillor Alexander to agree the recommendations contained within the report. Have we got a seconder?
May I formally second?
Formally second. Fine. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Provost and Convener. I've heard an awful lot of negatives about this project from Mr Callaghan and etc. We don't seem to be emphasising on the pluses for this project. The lone voice of the people that are actually for this project has not been mentioned this morning whatsoever. It's all about the negatives of this project. So I feel we should support the lone voice of the residents that are actually for this application. And it's quite strange that the main bodies, that the transport has been resolved, the drainage, CEPA, the coal authority, etc., have all withdrawn their applications. The bus that Mr Callan goes on about, the F25, that's only hearsay. We don't know if that bus is going to be put off. We don't know how long another bus is going to run for, so I think that's just a hearsay. Also, we're forgetting about what this could actually bring to the place. It's going to be a thriving community, growing economy, etc., etc. There's a better chance if there's more people staying there to get a better bus service. So I just think we should have a voice for the actual people who are for the plan.
Yeah. Thank you, Provost. I have already obviously formally seconded this. I appreciate what Councillor Grant has said, but there's a question I would have on this, and it's part of what David was talking about, and a wee bit of horizon scanning here. If you look at the land to the southeast of this development, you end up with what looks like potentially a gap site, the way it's formed. And my worry is, and one of the reasons why I'm against it, and I'd just like Mr Dryden maybe to confirm that, if this goes ahead, would this put additional pressure on the planners to treat the area, particularly to the southeast, as a gap site?
Yes, it's something that would possibly lead to that. Obviously, we have to look at each particular planning application on its own individual merits. But certainly the fact is, if that scenario was to become real, then that's certainly a factor that we'd have to be wary of, and it's certainly likely, in my own professional view, that if permission was to be granted, then it would be possibly expected that a further planning application may well follow at some time in the future. But clearly, we would have to look at it on its own merits, but there's every possibility that, yes, that could add to further additional pressure.
Thank you, Provost. I would just like to concur with the recommendations as presented and in terms of refusal of this application. Probably unlike many members here today, and I'm excluding obviously the members of Lower Braes and Upper Braes, because we obviously know this area, and just to let people know, I actually have walked up Fairhaven Terrace right up to the farm and down the hill at the other side to the bridge over the Polmont Burn, because this area is used obviously for walkers in terms of the core path area. And this road, to be honest with you, I couldn't see how an articulated truck or vehicles of a construction capacity could actually squeeze up Fairhaven Terrace and into the narrow path at the top of Fairhaven Terrace. So that's my first concern. The second concern I have is in relation to 7.A66, where in terms of flooding, it says flooding up to and including a 0.5% 1 in 200 year flood event. Do you know, everywhere we go, we are subject to flooding at the moment everywhere, rainfall. And also, I hate to tell you, because we live in Lower and Upper Braes, actually the water flows down. So, and of course it then accumulates on top of Robert's Head down in Grangemouth. So the area, all of the Upper Braes area, basically disgorges its water down the hill and onto Lower Braes. And I have concerns about the flooding, the potential of flooding in this area. I also concur with the view that the Redmuir Head area has, in terms of settlement expansion, has expanded exponentially over the years, and there's a massive amount of housing there. And I think that I think we should be preserving the greenfield sites and the open spaces in this area, because for many years, community councils, whether it be Redmuir Head or Wallastone or Shieltill in California, have always jumped up and down and said that they don't want a complete mass of housing from the Lower Braes right up to the Upper Braes area, so you wouldn't be able to distinguish where actually the villages were. So my concern is obviously the settlement expansion. And obviously the report touches on the coal mining shafts. But I also wandered round to Epworth Gardens and looked at that area as well. And I was concerned that a community facility has to be sacrificed for this expansion. And I do concur. And I do sympathise with the residents in Epworth Gardens. I think that that is totally unacceptable, and adding in a roundabout to add to the problems of Wallastone Brae is certainly, in my opinion, madness. However, my general point is that this application should be refused, and we should, in fact, support the residents in this area. Thank you.
Councillor Spears.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, I would correct you, just because you don't represent the area doesn't mean you don't know it. As a former resident in Manuel Rig in the area, I know the area very well. But I'm glad you did touch on the very, very salient point regarding the overbuilding in the Braes area and the knock-on effect flooding in Grangemouth. Most primary school kids are taught that rain runs downhill, And the more we flatten surfaces in the upper area, and we discussed this with development and Pullman, the bigger the chance of flooding in Grangemouth. We're all eagerly awaiting the Director's report on our drainage and how often and regular our drains are cleaned. And here we have further areas up the Braes that could only cause further flooding in Grangemouth. So I will also be moving against this. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, sir. Anybody else like to come in? Just to clarify where we are, we've got a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendations contained within the report. We have no amendment. Is there anybody want to come in and put an amendment in? Our debate closed. So we're agreed the motion? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Delighted that Deputy Provost is back with us. Thank you. This now takes us to item 5 on your agenda. It's the development of land for residential purpose use with associated infrastructure at land to the north of North Bank Farm, Bowness, for Miller Homes Limited. It's pages 134 to 171. Before I bring in Mr. Dryden for the report, we have a request from Miller Homes to do a small presentation. They get 10 minutes if members are agreed. They also asked if the reasoning behind this was read out, and this is what I'm going to do. A letter sent to Mr. Perry. I am writing to provide further information to the formal request made by my colleague Ross Stephen on Friday the 13th of September for my deputation to be heard at the Falkirk Council meeting on Friday the 20th September under agenda item 5, North Bank Farm. I would be obliged if you could inform Provost William Buchanan that the basis for my deputation request is as detailed below, and for it to be delivered to members accordingly, which I'm doing. Given only 10 elected members were in attendance at the predetermination hearing, which took place on Tuesday the 28th of May 2019 at Bowness Academy, I would like to appraise all members in attendance with a complete account afforded to those who attended that hearing. I feel this is not an unreasonable request, and I'm quite happy to support giving them 10 minutes for a presentation. How do members feel?
I'll second that.
You second that. Everybody agreed to that? Okay, thank you. Okay then, if the deputation would like to come forward. Now, I think we'll need to step down there, okay? Obviously, they're going to do some slides during the presentation, so myself and the Deputy Provost will step down there so that we don't miss out on any of the information that's given. Okay. Where is he? Where is this chap? You want to work with your slides? You're going to work the slides? Okay.
Ross will do the slides, thank you.
If you'd just like to, before we step down, you'll have a 10-minute period, right? Then there'll be a question time from members.
Okay.
If you just tell us who you are, what your designation is, and also your colleague down there, and give us a minute to get down, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Arthur Mann. I'm the Strategic Land Director for Miller Homes. I'm also a Chartered Town Planner. I've worked in the house building industry for over 20 years, and I've been with Miller Homes since 2012. Miller Homes is a leading Scottish home builder and was founded by Sir James Miller and his family in 1934. Indeed, we celebrate our 85th birthday on the 1st of November this year. We've always been headquartered in Edinburgh and now operate throughout the United Kingdom, and Scotland is particularly important to the business, accounting for over 25% of all investment in the UK as a whole. We currently have 23 major housing developments located across Scotland, primarily central Scotland, and Falkirk is an area of East Central Scotland that we are particularly keen to increase our investment in, so as to meet proven demand for our homes and local home buyers. We are proud and committed to our support on the job technical education and currently employ 6 apprentices across our sites and offices in Scotland. And we've also taken on 4 new office-based apprentices this summer as well, in technical and commercial education. Our current development at Kinglass Fields is adjacent to the application site before you this morning. We were pleased to receive planning permission for this 167 houses in 2016. And 3.5 years later, we're actually now beyond 80% reserved, but we're still maintaining 56% of all purchasers on this site have come from within the Bowness area. Indeed, 47% of buyers cited their choice of needing to upsize as the principal reason for moving house. 17.3% were first-time buyers. Again, a lot of them were from Bowness itself, and Help to Buy assisted 50% of those first-time buyers, and some by part exchange. As part of the current development that we're now coming towards completion on, we contributed a total planning gain package worth £671,000 to Falkirk Council. Of this, £150,000 was directed towards supporting Falkirk Council in their efforts to address capacity issues at St Mungo's Roman Catholic High School, and a further £58,000 towards nursery school provision in Bowness. A further £463,000 was contributed towards affordable housing requirements within the Bowness area. As part of my ongoing engagement, I like to obviously go out and meet local communities and hear what people have to say to me. It's not always nice to hear what they want to say sometimes, but that's the reality of engaging with local communities. But we've built a decent relationship with the local community over the years, partially because of our existing development at Kinglass Fields, and also as part of our bringing forward of proposals for North Bank Farm. We've made contributions to local community groups, including White Lady Mountain Bike off-road bike track, which opened in July this year, Newtown Park Association, the Bowness Playaway Playgroup, and the Kinneil Band, as well as the Community Council. As a national company investing locally, we're glad to be able to help out worthy causes in the Bowness area. The proposals before you today include provision for around 200 houses at North Bank Farm, of which 15% would be affordable. We believe this site would form a good logical extension to our Kinglass Field site and the wider south-east wedge of Bowness, filling in the jigsaw pieces as you come around this side of the town. I, along with my colleagues, have undertaken extensive community engagement on the proposals with Bowness Community Council, the local catchment school, which is Grange Primary School, and also Kinglass Medical Practice and Forth Valley National Health Service, as well as the wider public through community exhibitions in July 2017 and then again in February 2019, showing more detailed proposals. This has helped us to inform our thinking and ensure that the proposal, similar to Kinglass Fields, meets the housing needs and aspirations of the local community, both now and in the future. We are very pleased that our proposal enjoyed not a massive amount of objection. I think it was less than 20 objections in total from the local community, and crucially no objection from Bowness Community Council itself. This contrasts starkly with other Bowness housing sites that were proposed in the first iteration of the current proposed LDP and that have since been removed. A key feature of the proposal is also the much-needed realignment and widening of Burriston Road as it goes beyond our current development at Kinglass Fields. At the moment, the road beyond our site is a single straight line, and it's quite a dangerous road, and was a common feature that came back to me through engagement at both community consultation events and with the Community Council. As part of our development, we would introduce a realignment of the road through the initial 200-unit development area, and this would accompany much-needed new routes, safer routes to schools and footpaths, and linking the new site past our current site and into the wider road network going down Gauze Road. Addressing a key point that was raised at the predetermination hearing, I can confirm that the existing dip in the road will be flattened out through general cut and fill, and also just road geometry and engineering requirements that your own highways department would seek. It's clear that this would ultimately then offer both an improved and safer entrance to Bowness for all road users coming along the Burriston Road from the east. Also, as part of this current application, subject to today's decision, we have agreed in principle with your officers that a new planning gain package totalling some £1.2 million, mostly going towards local primary and nursery schooling in Bowness, would be provided, subject to a Section 75 agreement. And also, we would provide 30 of the 200 proposed units as affordable in nature. Indeed, I've been and met with the Chief Executive of Weslow Housing Association in Bathgate, who've expressed a strong interest in taking these units from us under a design and build package, should we be successful today. Those would then be delivered in probably 2021 at the first phases of development. Given the demand for our new build properties at Kinglass Fields to date from both the local community and wider fields, we view our adjacent North Bank Farm proposal to be a natural extension in helping Falkirk Council in meeting shortfalls in the effective housing land supply. This is made more relevant by the recent agreement of the Falkirk Housing Land Audit with Homes for Scotland. This is the annual measure of how much new housing is being delivered within the local authority area when tested against the requirements of the current adopted Falkirk Local Development Plan. When measured against the current LDP, Council officers agreed that the 5-year housing land supply target is not being met, and there is an immediate shortfall of at least 599 units in the current plan period. Extrapolated over 10 years, this rises to just over 1,000. This site could act as a bridge. This site could act to bridge that shortfall, and would also add to the effective housing land supply as a windfall site, posing no opportunity cost to the wider Falkirk Council area in terms of future housing being delivered elsewhere. And indeed, Bowness is identified as a high-growth area within the plan. In conclusion, I'd like to finish by thanking the community of Bowness. At all stages of the current development and in discussing plans for this new application, we have been met positively and met with positive and keen questioning, which has helped formulate both the proposal and potential planning gain package presented in the application before you. Thank you very much. Also, if anybody couldn't see the slides properly, we do have handouts if you'd like a copy.
Thank you very much for your presentation. 10 minutes, you were spot on with that. Thank you very much. This is an opportunity now for members to ask any questions in relation to the presentation. No questions? None? Okay then, you could retake your seat, sir. Thank you. Okay, the report before us today will be read by Mr Dryden. Thank you, Mr Dryden.
Thank you, Provost. You've heard somebody from Mr Mann, obviously the proposal that's before you. This is a planning application in principle. So again, a lot of the detail is indicative of the general strategy, and clearly a lot of detail would obviously be looked at when any subsequent detailed applications or approval matter specifying conditions were to follow should permission be granted. I would jump straight to your report before you on pages 140 is the consultations that have been undertaken as part of the assessment of the application. And I'll just pick out one or two just for you for noting and for your information. That our colleagues in Roads Development and Transport Planning Unit, they have no objection in principle to the application. They obviously acknowledge that the access implications. They would note that if there was to be any development exceeds 200 units, then there may well be a concern in terms of the access pressures that would exist on Gauze Road. But as things stand at the moment, our colleagues in Roads and Transport Planning Unit are satisfied that the existing road network, given the proposal that's been put before you, has the capacity to accommodate the proposed development. Education was mentioned earlier, and I would just confirm that you will see our colleagues in education have advised of the implications in terms of the school capacities, and this concentrates on impacts on Grange Primary School and the local nurse provision, and you'll see the detail of the contributed sum that would be expected should planning permission be granted. There have been no objections from the Coal Authority, and I would also advise that SEPA have also raised no objection in terms of the third risk, drainage, waste management and mine working issues that may well exist in that area. Scottish Water have advised of sufficient capacity in the treatment works. You'll see the Scottish Rights of Way Society. Obviously, there are rights of way that exist in the vicinity. They will obviously be catered for, and it's just a caveat that, should permission be granted, that clearly these rights of way are maintained during construction and post-development. I would draw your attention also to paragraph 4.13. You will see West Lothian Council as an adjacent authority. They have requested development be subject to a financial contribution to the cross-boundary travel patterns. This predominantly relates to proposals you may be aware of to improve the slips at Junction 3. As you know, traffic are unable to either come off the motorway at Junction 3 if you're coming from the west, or if you want to go on to the west. Obviously, our colleagues in Transport Planning have looked at that and feel that there is no impact of that nature. But I would draw your attention to the fact that your development plan does make provision in terms of land safeguarding that should obviously the slips be forthcoming in the future. The area of land that is within your boundary has been safeguarded in your development plan. As been mentioned by Mr Mann this morning, there has been no comment made from the Bowness Community Council, and you will see on page 141 that there has been a total of 15 representations, 10 of which are objections, 1 letter of support. The details of those are outlined in the subsequent pages through pages 142, 143. Turning to your development plan, the issues that you are considering this morning are very similar to the previous application. In terms of the development plan, it has been acknowledged that we do currently have an ineffective housing land supply, and hence this is the reason that the application it's come in advance of that, and you've heard the arguments for that. As it stands just now, the site is not identified in your development plan, and in the emerging local development plan 2, nor is this identified as a site as being a preferred site. The Drum Farm site, in terms of strategic expansion of Bowness to meet the housing needs for the forthcoming years, is the preferred site at this point in time. Therefore, it's a countryside location, and you'll see in the main body of the report, over the number of pages, starting at pages 145 onwards, there are a number of policies that clearly are supportive of the principle of this development, but again, these will be all detail. But the fundamental issue, a concern remains, is to do with the site not being identified or allocated in your current development plan. In summing up, it's useful to look at the actual, starting at page 167 in the conclusions. You will see that we have summarised in the conclusions the kind of benefits and the costs of having regard to this application. There are obviously economic benefits. For construction, you've heard from the applicant this morning the benefits. Obviously, there would be an immediate addressing of the effective housing land supply, the opportunity to improve the core network, and obviously improve Borrowstone Road. However, balanced against this is one of the key principles that is a concern of officers, is that this is obviously significantly contrary to your current development plan. Obviously, and the emerging LDP2, likewise, as I've already said, does not identify the site for housing. While we do acknowledge that there is currently an ineffective housing land supply, it is expected that this issue will be addressed in the future through the LDP2 process. And I think one of the main concerns you will see, which is reflected in the recommendation, whilst recommending refusal, is that we are of the view that we should let the local development plan process have due course and let that determine clearly the sites being preferred. And clearly at this point in time, to determine this application today to support it is the view of officers that this would undermine that process. It would be premature. So, Provost, on that view, the recommendation you'll see is outlined in page 163. It's in terms of the summary I've just given you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, Provost. Thanks very much. It said that there was a great deal of similarities between this item and the previous item. That's true, but there was one significant difference, and that essentially is the record of Miller Homes in Bowness. We do have to acknowledge the relationship with the community in Bowness as a positive relationship, and certainly the presentation that they gave at the hearing was very positive, and I congratulate them on it. However, Provost, and there's always a however, that doesn't change the fact that if we approve this application today, we're approving a significant variation to the local plan. And that at this point in time, I don't think is in the best interest of the community, in the best interest of this authority, or indeed in the best interest of Miller Homes. Because like Mr Dryden, I do believe that this application is premature. To go through the process of local plan consideration is the right way to go. To take advantage of an anomalous situation in relation to interpretation of planning land being held over for housing I don't think does justice to the reputation that Miller Homes have built up in Bowness. And I hope that we take that into consideration for the future. Although there were only 10 members at the hearing, the fact remains that it was Corey. It was held on location, and it gave everyone the opportunity to listen to both sides of the debate, and it was certainly a worthwhile exercise. It's also worthwhile in the fact that it gave us an opportunity to have a look at the roads network in that particular area, and the roads network is horrendous. I doubt very much whether the application will deal with the aspect of the problems that exist in terms of the width of the road. Any vehicle travelling at speed does so at significant risk to themselves and to any traffic coming the other way. It's a single road, single track for most of the way, and it had me gripping the seat and as we approached each and every bend. Several times we had to pull in to allow vehicles past, heading in the opposite direction, and again, I don't think that the roads network could carry that particular number of houses. Equally, it is countryside development, and there's a presumption against countryside development as per the policies of this authority, and policies that were developed over a period of time, and which I think represent a good balance between the development interests of developers and the interests of the community, and the interests in particular of those who wish to protect the general environment and greenfield sites as a policy statement. So with that, Provost, I will formally move the recommendations that are contained within the report to reject this particular application.
Thank you, Provost Convener. I'm very, very confused, so I hope somebody can sort me out. I've always heard that Falkirk is open for business when it comes to building this area, but we seem to be anything but that in Falkirk. If it's not Miller Homes, it's Taylor Wimpey. If it's not them, it's Persimmons. they've got to jump through hoops to get permission from Falkirk Council to build out in this area. I'm totally confused. Miller Homes, for example, everything we've asked for, Section 75, etc., etc., they have said they'll give us it. They're even going to fix a body road that's already got a dip in it, but they have agreed to fix that for us. But once again, no, we're not good for that. I don't believe in reincarnation, but if I did, I'd come back to Falkirk as a driving instructor, because the people in Falkirk obviously can't drive, because we have no confidence in any of our drivers at all out here. We've always got obstructions the way this road is too narrow, we can't do this, we can't do this. I'm totally confused, Provost. With this council, we say no to practically everything when it comes to building. How many developers are we going to say no to? How long are they going to put up with this? That's my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. As I said to you before, this is effectively a planning committee today, made up of everybody that's here, and everybody is entitled to their own opinion, and you gave it, and well done. Councillor Munro and then Councillor Bowes. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I think this application is very different from the one before, because it's a follow-on from an existing development and adjacent to a development, and the road conditions that were acceptable in the previous development still exist, but the developers actually clearly looking to improve the road. I would ask, however, the officers about the proposition that they could drop down towards the drum. Is this something that's being considered also? Because that would take traffic off the Borrowston Road itself.
Yes, Provost and Councillor, correct. There is a live, you'll see in the report in terms of current applications, there is a live application currently that's with us just now under consideration, which would potentially address that issue to actually create an access from Borrowston Road to the Drum development. That is correct.
There is a lot of pressure on Burness at the moment in terms of various sites upcoming, most of which the local community have grave concerns over. I shan't name them, but concerns over flooding and other issues over roads again. However, I do feel that in this particular case, the issues are those just of the road and the issue of it being in the green belt. However, it says under impact of green belt and contamination that the site wasn't used for landfill, but there is evidence of former quarrying. So I'm not sure that qualifies as green belt. If it was a quarry, is that green belt?
I think obviously this is a historical situation that's been referred to. Clearly there is reference to some previous use many, many years ago. Clearly, as things stand at this moment in time, the site obviously, its condition, its appearance is certainly agricultural land and associated woodland, and it clearly falls within the designation of greenbelt. I think the uses that have been referred to in this instance are a long time ago, and clearly that's been superseded by the current status of the land that's currently reflected as being greenbelt and predominantly agricultural land.
In view of the fact that there are very few objections and from the general community, and it's a follow-on site from the other one, I would actually propose that we should go forward with this site.
Yeah, just to confirm once again, I asked when Councillor Alexander moved the motion. Is there a seconder? Anybody seconding? Councillor Bowes, you were coming in anyway. Okay.
Reserve the right, please.
Just to confirm that, as I understand it, Councillor Munro's amendment would be amended to grant amendment on subject to the conclusion of a satisfactory section 75 and subject also to conditions as would be determined by the Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Provost. As I think as Councillor Alexander had actually identified that there is a number of positives in this. As Mr Dryden has said, the consultations have all been done, and I know this probably doesn't sound like somebody who's going to second it, but the consultations have all been done and they've all come out reasonably well. The presentation both down at Bowness and here by Miller Homes, I believe also was very positive. There's a couple of items though, and this is why I am seconding Councillor Alexander's motion. And one of them is the classic on the road, and I get Councillor Grant's statement. But the proposal at the moment, you've got a dipped road, and the proposal at the moment is to straighten it out. It's not widening it; it's just straightening that road out. When you've got a road that's clear in front of you and you can see further ahead, people will tend to drive faster on it. Whereas if there was some sort of system where you were actually putting some traffic control or slowing down the traffic in the area, I would have probably taken that as a more positive thing. I think just straightening out the dip will actually make traffic faster on that road, rather than at the moment, when you can't see something, even the best and the worst of drivers will slow down when you can't see, and as you're coming up over, you will again slow down. At the moment, we're going to straighten something out and make it a really fast going through. But I think the crucial point, and Councillor Alexander's and Mr Dryden's, is the prematurity of it. I like the company who are doing it, from everything I've seen from them so far, their history in the area. The proposal itself is obviously a reasonable proposal, but that's the big sticking point for me, and I think it's a pretty major sticking point. I think if this was probably coming in at a later stage, we'll just put it that way, I think that may change, and I think they're probably just too early on this one, and just as has been said, it is premature. Thank you.
Councillor Colley, thank you.
I just have a quick question for officers. In 4.2, that there's mention throughout the report around capacity of local GP practices, and I wondered whether there was further updates from NHS Forth Valley regarding capacity in the area.
It's a point well made, Councillor Colley. We did receive, I think you received the report at the time of writing. There was no response, but we have had a response from NH Forth Valley. They are advising that clearly there are 3 health centres that currently serve the Bowness area, this being Richmond Practice, Forth View Practice and Kinglass Medical Centre. The health centres currently have no clinical room capacity to support additional patients, and those who were at the PDH hearing will recall there was some concern raised from the audience about that. What they have advised that certainly they would be looking for a contribution level to address this issue, and this is all to do with the clinical space and support space, and they have advised of a contribution of £1,989 per unit, and that would obviously be dealt with through a actual contribution through a planning agreement, Section 75 agreement. At this point in time, there's no details as how that would be achieved, but there's nothing to say that it couldn't, they would find obviously a way to address that through through utilising the existing facilities that exist.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Provost. I suppose it kind of follows on logically to what both Councillor Bowes and Councillor Alexander were saying, and indeed the point raised there by Councillor Colley in terms of the sustainability of this particular development. The recommendations are quite clear and set out in terms of where this particular site is, and that it might well be a development on the back of another development, but it's still not within our local plan. It's still within the framework of what's going to be coming into the emerging plan by the time that these units are completed. It's not something that has been looked at, an area that's been assessed for this sort of scale of development, that we're not talking about a an infill development or small nature of development. The reason we're sitting here listening to it at council is because of the nature of the impact it will have on the area and on our area as a whole. My concern is that this type of development has not been consulted with the community and as a whole, as our whole district, and looked at as an area for growth and for this sort of sustainable growth. And we already have policies which would indicate that this sort of development wouldn't be suitable for this site. And we can look at addressing these individually one at a time in terms of the road, in terms of how much per person the Section 75 would be for health or for transport for childcare, all these things. But ultimately, from what I can see on balance, looking at this particular site, it's not suitable for the scale of development that is being asked for at this time, and that if we were looking at this as a planning committee and we were assessing it against the plan and the local plan, which effectively we are, but in the kind of detail we would go into in the planning committee discussion, in that depth, I would have a great deal of difficulty in supporting that, and not in indicating that if this could be argued on this particular site, particularly considering its position in the countryside and extending out and the limits to extending out, that we would have that situation all across the district, and we can't start that level of exception for such a large development. It would start to become a very dangerous precedent in my mind. I appreciate that, as the convener said, planning convener said, Miller Homes have been trying to address these issues and have been consulting with the community in a constructive way. But at this stage, I would agree that it is premature and that it wouldn't meet the kind of criteria that would override the objections to the local plan, so I wouldn't be able to support it.
Thank you, Provost. And I've got a question for Mr Dryden, and it's, if we look at 6.1 and various pages through the report, it talks about the road traffic and access, and it's the road issues I want to talk about and the safety issues. And Mr Mann gave us a description of what they propose to do with the road. In your opinion, does this cover and help with your concerns that you've voiced in here?
I think clearly you'll see from obviously my colleagues from Transport Planning Unit and Roads Development Unit who are here today, but we've sought their advice, and certainly the principle, because I would bear in mind this application is in principle, so clearly we do not have the detail that we'd normally associate. That would clearly follow at a later stage. But generally, the principle of a development of this scale in terms of impacts on Borston Road is on the threshold, because you'll note there is mention being made that if it exceeds 200, then there may have to be other mitigation, and clearly the potential access through the drum site, which is being promoted in your development plan. Obviously, the realignment of the road, and there was mention about the straightening of the Borston Road, as Councillor Bow said. I would say that the indicative plan that's been submitted by Miller Homes that shows potential realignment of Borston Road to act as a kind of traffic calming, but that's, again, it's a general strategy and thrust, and it's not in the detail. So my view at this point in time, having taken advice from my colleagues in roads and transport planning, that this development, certainly on a technical roads grounds in principle, could work, and it would not have an adverse impact. There are no objections being raised in that regard. Again, until we get into the detail about alignment and various changes and levels, that would come at a later date. But at this point in time, the general principle from a roads traffic impact is not having an adverse impact in that locality.
Provost. Fine. Thanks, Provost, for letting me in. I'm really glad I came along today, because I've heard a lot of interesting stuff. I've not been advised that water runs down the hill. But when I referred to it, was referred earlier to the LDP, and that the LDP belongs to the people. Well, obviously it does. And the people of Bowness, may I say, are very adept when they're happy at raising objections, particularly on planning. See from this document here that in the public presentation there have been 10 objections. 10 objections from the whole of Bowness doesn't seem to me to be a really big issue. Reference has also been made to this plan being premature. So should we agree? We agree just now because it's premature. Yet Mr Dryden was asked the question
on the last application, where there may be ifs and maybe buts, if somebody grants this to be a gap site, could it be deemed a gap site, and could it in the future be brought forward and somebody would say that's a gap site, so we've got to grant it? We haven't got an application for the site, so we're using the crystal ball just to try and answer honestly, but the fact still remains the application isn't there for a gap site, and it wasn't there either. It's also fair to say, my understanding of the situation is that every planning application is deemed to be granted until it comes forward. The other thing that we have here, as I say, we've covered the 10 letters of objection. The fact that it's premature. How many times over the years, and I've never been on the planning committee, although I was in charge of the LDP at one time, how many times have we actually put things in that weren't in the LDP, that were in the following LDP and that were brought forward? So it's not an unusual thing for this to happen. Could I ask Mr. Dryden or his colleagues, first of all, pause here, Provost, for a minute and ask them what improvements we have, if any, to improve this particular road?
I'm unable to know what plans are ahead, whether obviously Mr Stevens from Roads and Mr Collins are here today, but at this point in time, I'm not aware of any other plans that are being promoted out with this application.
I think it's a fair bet when you talk about premature in the next 100 years bracket, if the council is going to improve that particular road. The other thing here is that drivers come along this road at speed. Well, I need to say, if they come along at speed, and it's a road in Falkirk Council area, they must be very grateful indeed, because everywhere I drive about in Falkirk, there's traffic jams, and there's traffic jams because we haven't got money doing up the roads, and here's somebody coming along to remove a hazard. A dangerous road is what we heard, and this company is coming along, and they're going to resolve that particular aspect, so that is worth listening to as well. The thing I wonder, Provost, and if I could ask, is it possible to try and, because I think we're all agreed that Miller Homes made an excellent presentation. It appears that Miller Homes, certainly Bowness, have benefited in sense through Miller Homes. Miller Homes have also obviously benefited, and I'd like to congratulate Mr Dryden on his comments that he has made. But would it be possible, Provost, if we think that this application is premature, as I said, that means it's 25 years from now or 30 years from now, we wouldn't have a time scale on that. Would it be possible to agree this application in principle?
Thank you, Provost. I think the short point to make to that is it is an application for planning in principle. So that's the stage we're at the moment. I'm not quite sure that's the question you're asking, but that's technically it is a planning application in principle.
Nothing else, Provost.
Thank you, Provost. First, I would like to congratulate Miller Homes. They have done a lot in Bowness for the first phase of the houses that they've actually developed. The White Lady mountain bike trail, if it wasn't for use, we wouldn't have been there by the end to open it, whatever. There's a few questions that I would like to ask first. Oh, sorry. It's education. Grange Primary School is the catchment school for the new development. The roll now, is it 230?
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, fine, that's the first question, and Mr Teed's sitting there. If you could just tell us who you are, sir, for people that don't know you and your designation, and then answer the question. Thank you, sir.
Richard Teed, I'm on Children's Services. Deputy Provost, the local primary school is Grange Primary School. The roll is currently 230. Yeah, 232.
Does that include the nursery?
No, it doesn't, no.
Because I know the nursery's got the... How many's in the nursery? Is that 30?
I don't actually know that figure, but I do know that we're going to be using all the capacity in the nursery to deliver the
That's right,
expansion of early learning and childcare by 2020.
What's it actually sitting at just now, Grange Primary?
Grange Primary, about 89% occupancy.
89%?
Yeah.
Right, but the first phase has all been done, so it would just be the new phase. I take it this new phase would still go under the Grange Primary School, or would there be, could we allocate to another school?
No, this is within the Grange Primary School
It is going
catchment.
to be the Grange Primary School.
And it'd be on the edge of the catchment, so it's not an area that could easily be zoned to another school.
That was my next question. I know I went to the Grange, so I know the layout and whatever. Can we build onto the school?
Yeah, we would deal with any capacity pressures that arose, and that's why we've asked for contributions as part of this application if it's approved. Similarly, the drum development is contributing towards any future capacity pressures at the school.
Right, that's fine. The road safety, it's just what Councillor Goldie saying about that. This is it's a back road. It's a category 4, this road. It doesn't get gritted in the winter, this back road, just to tell folk as well. Now, Miller Homes has tried their best. It's great what they've done so far for the first phase of the development. Sorry about this, my throat's going, I think. But I really still have grave concerns about this. It's not just about the front part of the road, where the development's going to be. It's actually going out of Bowness. On this road, it's single tracked all the way out. And people do use it. They use it well. I've had constituents contact me saying even during the night they can hear the young boys racing on it. As well, thanks, though. So I have still got grave concerns. I know Miller Homes are trying their best with this. If it had come forward with the one before for the drum, I would have been more happy with this. I think it's just come the wrong way about for me. But I'm in a catch because I do think Miller Homes is great. The houses they've put up so far are brilliant. But my concerns are this road because it being single-tracked. And I do think it's going to end up causing issues with an accident if people keep continuing using it, and the heavy vehicles as well.
Thank you, Provost. I think it is unfortunate that at the juncture that this application has come forward, because I think 6 months, a year's time, we might have been in a different position having adopted an LDP2. However, we also have to look at some of the opportunities that it affords us, and the officers have actually given a very compelling report that feels a little bit out of odds with the final recommendations, because there always will be the need for windfill opportunities for housing sites, and not every housing site will go to completion. There will always need to be a consideration across the council district with regard to the presumptions against greenfield compared to brownfield and the availability of land sites. And I think this being in the east of the council area is one of those where there isn't the same opportunities for the alternative sites to come forward. So I think that there is a balance to be struck around all of that. And because of where we are, it puts us in a very difficult position. I attended the predetermination meeting in Bowness, and the biggest issue was around the road. That was what the largest concern was around the road and the safety aspects of the road there. And I do believe that if further consideration was given to that and how that actually could be managed, then I think that some of those that had concerns could well be more in favour of seeing this development going forward. Fact is, it's 200 development with a significant proportion of affordable housing. It's a developer that knows the area, has worked well in the area, and the vast majority of the previous properties have gone to local people. allowing them to upsize or downscale depending on where they are in their lifestyle. It's a very difficult decision on this one because of where we are, but I think there may well be some opportunities here in order to meet our land supply targets and actually deliver a good sustainable development in Bowness.
Anybody else like to come in? No. I'll let you wind up in a minute. I'm just going to ask a question, Mr. Dryden. In your summary and your answering some of the questions, I'd just like, obviously, there's disparity in relation to the ground in terms of brownfield site or greenfield site. The other major issue is that you've stated quite clearly that there is a non-effective land supply in the area at the minute. So what credence then do you give when you're detailing the report in relation to those particular two items?
Well, clearly, you'll see in the report, obviously notwithstanding what historical uses may have been the site, it's certainly prime agricultural land predominantly. And obviously, this is reflected also its status in your current development plan as being in the green belt. In terms of the other matters that we're raising, again, the main issue comes back to obviously the effective housing land supply. And I think you'll see particularly, it's summarised in recommendation reason 2, it's to do with a more sustainable approach, is to look at the housing land supply through obviously the forthcoming LDP2. And I think, as I've said and previously with the other application, was the appropriate way to do this would be in a coordinated way through the local plan review process, so that the broader considerations of settlement growth can be undertaken. And I think that's the crux of the situation that we find ourselves in at this point in time. I would reiterate that it is expected that the LDP2 will certainly address the issue of the effective housing land supply in that regard.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks very much, Provost. I said in the last item where there was 500 and odd number of objectors, the number of objectors in planning terms is irrelevant. It's the issues that arise from it. So the fact that there's 10 objectors to this is equally as irrelevant to the ruling on the last particular item. In terms of this item, the prematurity is, and it surprises me that Miller Homes have taken the view that they have in submission of this particular application, because they're well aware of the requirement by the council to produce a development plan. Because the development plan itself is the openness and the transparency of the planning process. That is the area where the general public have their say. It's the area where the detailed objections can be raised. And it's the area where the partnerships can develop between the community and the developers. Now, I think that Miller Homes are probably best placed to develop that particular relationship further on. But they have to recognise the role of the elected members in terms of our development of the development plan itself. They also have to recognise the impact that proposals will have on the community, and we're not always seeing that. So it's not a case of Falkirk not being open for business. Clearly Falkirk is open for business. There's something like this, the size of an existing council ward that has had approved planning consents granted but is yet to be developed. So the Falkirk in the past has a very, very proactive policy directive which saw deliberately the issue of growth within our plans. That's something that is unsustainable in the long term, but gave the local authority, I think, the opportunity to develop, to grow the tax base, grow the opportunities that arose from housing development, and grow the concept of a Falkirk district as a viable and vibrant centre. And it did so through the local plan process. And that's what we're asking the developer, in this case, to do, to go through the local plan process, to engage the community and to operate in a manner which I think that they've demonstrated in the past. So it surprises me that they've taken the attitude this time of seeking to take advantage of, again, an anomaly within the process, something that we inherited in terms of the deficiency of the land reserved for development. So I think, Provost, we are open for business. We want to see developers in our community. We want to see them on our terms, though, because our terms are those of the general public. And that's something that hasn't seemed to be taken into consideration in this particular instance. And again, that surprises me. But with that, Provost, I think I've dealt with most of the points, the main relevant points that have come from speakers that have spoken against the motion that I've moved today. But hopefully we'll see that being recognised as part of the vote. But we'll wait and see, Provost.
Thank you very much, everybody. It was a very frank and open debate. We'll now go to the vote. Just for clarity, it's quite simple. We've got a motion moved and seconded to go with the recommendation contained within the report. We've got an amendment moved and seconded to grant the application.
Yes, thank you, Provost. And just to confirm that again, it is a motion moved by Councillor Alexander, seconded by Councillor Bowes, to refuse the application for the reasons set out in paragraph 8 of the officer's report. And the amendment is moved by Councillor Munro and seconded by Councillor Grant, which against the motion would have a minded to grant decision subject to the conclusion of Section 75 agreement and thereafter subject to such conditions as would be determined by the Director of Development Services. Provost Buchanan.
Motion.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Motion.
Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Councillor Balfour.
Motion.
Councillor Binney. Motion. Councillor Bissett.
Amendment.
Councillor Blackwood.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Coleman.
Motion.
Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs.
Motion.
Councillor Garner.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Amendment.
Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Munro. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. And Councillor Spears.
Motion.
Thank you. Provost, there are 16 votes for the motion, there are 7 votes for the amendment, and the motion is accordingly carried.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Before you go, just to say that there's a couple of our members are not very well at the moment, and I'm sure that we send them all our best wishes. Thank you very much.